for instance, I tripped up on Tony Robbins the other day, and he made a good point. He's like, business is spiritual. He said, real business is spiritual because that's your gift. The more you can reach people, and with your gift, with what you've been through, the more effective you're going to be, and that's good business. And I was like, yes, I agree, and this is where it comes into what we're doing. That sounds great. It's all inspiring, but how effective can someone actually be if they haven't done work on themselves? To the degree that we're talking about, like really, if they've healed. If they haven't, and they take that as a concept, and it sounds good, and it's even inspiring to them, it's just going to keep people looping back into the same thing that all these industries are doing. They're giving them some information. It sounds good. It's even inspirational, but it doesn't have someone really genuinely and honestly look at themselves on deeper levels that would have a far greater effect in their life, whether it be business or anything, relationship, whatever, when you're doing that work. Okay. Otherwise, it sounds good, like, yeah, and that's your focus again, because I want business, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I've got a justification now. Oh, it sounds good. I'm being spiritual. Business is spiritual, you know? And I'm going to help a lot of people because of this. How do you expect you're going to be effective in your life if you can't have the wherewithal to really look at yourself in your own home, in your own life, at your own vices, mm-hmm. and things that are really what's running the show unconsciously because of an identity that you're unwilling to really recognize and look at?
Okay, and I get that. But what I'm saying is, like, there's a trap there, because you're like saying, how can that person really talk about X when their life isn't working? And I feel like that's the same conversation that I have with you often, which is like, well, how can I say anything to anybody? My life isn't working. And I'm like, no, I think that makes it relatable as long as you like own it and say, you know what, like, my life isn't working, but.
Here's the thing. I think in some regards my life doesn't work, like when it comes to finance. But then when I let go of that, like when I simply start to do the work in a different capacity as far as like trusting and allowing and having faith, things start to smooth out. They don't smooth out in the way that maybe I might, with my ego, perceive that I think that I would like for them to, in some grandiose way, but they smooth out and there's provision. I'm provided for as I need to be. And it's not over the top. It's not excessive. It's not the way the world would think that should look according to what your life is working out. So the way that I see my ego sees the world and what the world would make important socially and culturally and all these other factors is my ego. Because I want to belong, I want to look good, I want to, all these things. I want to survive emotionally, identifiably. And I want to have an identity in the world that fits, Instead, right. Like there's an element of, let's crack that over the head.
I agree. I think I'm just saying that when people talk about the world, what comes up for me is it sounds a little...
Well, we talk about the drift. There's a drift no matter what. Even in gratitude, there was a drift. Mm-hmm. And we use that, as the ego. The ego is the ego no matter where you are. And the ego is going to utilize everything to keep itself in place. And so getting clear on what the ego is, to simplify it, that's denial of who we actually are in our wholeness, which doesn't need anything. But then the ego would see that as insane. Because what are you talking about? You've got to pay bills, you've got to, drive around, you've got to have survival, you've got to wear clothes, you've got to do all these things. You've got to have friends and relationships, and that's what's necessary. But no, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you're selling yourself out because you're trying to become something that the ego thinks you should become in order to be successful, in order to be happy, in order to be fulfilled, grateful, all these things, in order to have a peaceful world. Like, it's so funny because it uses all these things. And then we have people that we look up to saying these things, and we think that they know what they're talking about. But then when you take a look at their life, like behind closed doors, it's not that at all. And then if you take even a step further, if you take a look inside their own mind, inside their own heart, internally, it's not like that at all.
Okay.
But they keep striving for an idea of what they think that is and what they think that should be.
Okay, but hold on. So you're saying, but when we look inside their mind, like, how can you even speak to that? Like, whose mind can you look into?
You can notice someone's mind and how they function in terms of the privacy of their life, their reactions, their behaviors. If someone's a closet alcoholic and they're in denial of that, that shows up. That's someone's revelation of their mind and how it's really working. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If someone's a sex addict and they've got trainer identification and title, and they personify that to the world, but yet behind closed doors they're on porn whacking off, and they're really addicted to sex, and they're unwilling to be transparent about that, that shows up. That's their life in terms of their internal world in their mind that they're in denial of, that's showing up in life. So yeah, you can have a pretty good idea of someone's mind and how it's working in their reactions to things, their perception of things, their expression, whether that's authentic or inauthentic, and how those two things are always revealed. And here's the thing, as you do the work on yourself, you become much more in tune to that. Not from a place of being judgmental, but you're in tune. You can notice the discord in it. Whether it's a feeling or a sense or an intuition, I can't really put it into an intellectual format, but it's there. You become more aware of things in their honesty because you're living more from your heart, and your heart can just see things for what they actually are. It's not the mind getting in the way of it, trying to interpret the ego's way. And it's not trying to be right either about, like, let's make this person wrong. It's just like, oh, I see what they're actually up to. I can see that this is actually something else that's going on.
Neutrally.
Just like neutrally, just for what it is. I mean, there might be some, I don't know, there's a neutrality in it for what it is, and there's also something about it that can be like, no.
Well, there's...
No, like that's not what we're up to here. Please stop. You listen to things in a way where you start to pick up on incongruencies which are actually truths. Does that make sense? You start to notice things that are out of alignment with what someone's saying in terms of how they're living.
Okay, now stop a second, because I'm going to turn it around a little bit on you. Is that true for you because this is actually mirroring something for you to take a look at?
I think in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. So I think when I'm neutral, no.
Got it.
When there's a charge, yeah, it's mirroring something for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am being like that.
Right.
That could mean that there's something still that I get to look at that I have led to do work on. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's mirroring how I actually am myself.
Right, I get that.
Joe Tedesco really kind of helped me get clear on that, because I was falling into a rigidity of, oh, if I've got energy on someone, that means I'm like that. A pedophile? I'm not a pedophile. I don't have pedophilia issues personally, internally, secretively.
Mm-hmm.
But I might have energy on that in terms of someone doing that to my daughter. And that's something that I get to make peace with in a different capacity. There's an awareness about that I have energy on, judgment on, I'm not okay with. There's no acceptance. To be able to get to a place of acceptance but not condoning, like that fine line. Mm-hmm. Being at peace with it, for me, there's an issue that I have personally about people who are fake, who try to portray themselves to be a certain way to, I want to say, take advantage of others or to get the praise of others for their own personal agenda, and hidden behind the idea that it's helping people.
Okay, so that brings me to something we were talking about yesterday. And like in our conversations, for my own reasons, I really don't want to mention people's names.
Sure.
Okay? Because I don't want that out there.
I agree. I don't want to mention people's names either. And that being said, I want to utilize my experiences with people to make an expression and points that I'm making from experiences that I've had.
Okay, and so going back to the conversation we were having yesterday about a person in your life that is seemingly not being very authentic but having amazing results.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that you probably look at and say, well, I would like results on some level like that, but I don't want to be like that person. Mm-hmm. And yet to me, it says, well, if you're like that person, you can have these results. And there's a trap in there somewhere, because those results, whether they're notoriety, financial, whatever, those are results that we talk about and we want, and yet we don't want to be like the people who are getting those results.
Yeah, and so that's something for me to look at, because that's my ego thinking that I need that to feel good about myself and to feel good about my life. When again, it always goes back to this one thing: give it up. Give it up to God and have faith that God's going to work it out. This is the toughest thing for us to do, toughest thing for me to do. I think for everybody to do. And that's, put it very plainly, directly, and simply, to give up control and to allow.